The temperature was 40 degrees below zero. Soviet soldiers controlled the forest, searching for one Finnish sniper who had killed over 500 of their men in just 100 days. They sent counter-snipers, artillery barrages, and entire companies to hunt him down. But he was invisible, appearing only to kill, then vanishing into the snow. The Soviets called him the White Death. This is the story of the most lethal sniper in human history. A farmer who became a ghost. Stay until the end to discover how he survived being shot in the face with an explosive bullet and what he said about killing more than 500 men. Simo Häyhä was born on December 17, 1905 in the municipality of Rautjärvi in southeastern Finland, near the Russian border. He entered a world of bitter cold, endless forests, and a Finnish people who had endured centuries of being caught between Swedish and Russian imperial ambitions. His family were farmers, not wealthy, not poor, but hardy people who survived through relentless work in one of Europe's harshest climates. Young Simo, the second of 7 children, learned from birth that survival in Finland required toughness, patience, and the ability to endure conditions that would kill softer people. The Häyhä family farm was small but self-sufficient. They grew potatoes and grain during Finland's short summer growing season. They raised livestock that could survive the brutal winters, and they hunted extensively in the vast forests that surrounded their farm, supplementing their diet with game and earning money from selling furs. In this environment, young Simo learned to shoot almost as soon as he could walk. Guns were tools, essential for survival, and every Finnish farm boy learned to use them proficiently. Finland in the early 20th century was part of the Russian Empire, though Finnish people maintained their own language, culture, and identity. The Finns were ethnically and culturally distinct from Russians, speaking a Finno-Ugric language completely unrelated to Russian, practicing Lutheran Christianity while Russians were Orthodox, and maintaining a fierce independence that Russian authorities found troublesome. Simo grew up with a deep sense of Finnish identity and an understanding that Finns and Russians were different peoples with different interests. In 1917, when Simo was 12 years old, the Russian Revolution erupted. Finland seized the opportunity to declare independence, breaking away from Russian control after a century of domination. But independence immediately led to civil war, a brutal conflict between Finnish whites, conservatives, nationalists, and those who feared Bolshevism, and Finnish Reds, socialists and communists who wanted Finland to align with evolutionary Russia. The civil war was vicious, dividing families and communities. The Häyhä family supported the whites, like most rural Finnish farmers who feared communist land distribution. The whites won Finland's civil war in 1918, establishing an independent, democratic Finland aligned with Western Europe rather than Soviet Russia. But the civil war left deep scars, and Finland remained acutely aware that Soviet Russia, which had emerged from the revolutionary chaos as a communist dictatorship, wanted to control Finland again. Young Simo grew up in a newly independent nation that knew it might have to fight for that independence at any moment. Simo attended school sporadically. Finnish farm children worked during planting and harvest seasons, attending school only when agricultural work allowed. He completed basic education but never pursued advanced schooling. He didn't need it. His future was already determined. He would be a farmer, like his father and grandfather, working the same land, enduring the same harsh climate, living the same life that Häyhä men had lived for generations. But Simo had one hobby that he pursued with unusual dedication: marksmanship. He joined a local shooting club and practiced constantly, competing in shooting competitions throughout Finland. Shooting clubs were common in Finland. This served both as sporting organizations and as informal military training, preparing Finnish men to defend their country if necessary. Simo proved to be an exceptional shot, winning numerous local competitions and earning a reputation as one of the best marksmen in his region. What made Simo exceptional wasn't just accuracy. Many Finnish men were excellent shots. What made him special was his understanding of patience and fieldcraft. Simo had spent his childhood hunting in Finnish forests, learning to move silently, to remain motionless for hours, to read terrain and wind, and to make every shot count because ammunition was expensive. These skills developed for hunting rabbits and deer would later translate perfectly to hunting men. In 1925, at age 20, Simo completed his mandatory military service in the Finnish army. All Finnish men served 1 year or longer for specialized roles, learning basic infantry skills and preparing to defend Finland if war came. Simo served in a bicycle infantry battalion. Finnish terrain made traditional cavalry impractical, so Finnish forces used bicycles for mobility. His military service was unremarkable. He was a competent soldier, but showed no particular brilliance or ambition. He completed his service and returned to farming, apparently content with simple rural life. Through the 1920s and 1930s, Simo lived the life of a Finnish farmer. He worked his family's land, hunted in the surrounding forests, participated in shooting competitions, and lived peacefully. He was short, only about 5 feet 3 inches tall, and slight with a compact build common among Finnish farmers. He spoke little, smiled rarely, and avoided unnecessary social interaction. His neighbors described him as quiet, hardworking, and intensely private. Nothing about Simo Haiha suggested he would become one of history's most lethal soldiers. But international events were moving toward catastrophe. In 1939, Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia signed Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, secretly dividing Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. The Soviet Union received permission to dominate the Baltic states and Finland. Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin immediately began pressurizing Finland to cede territory and accept Soviet military bases on Finnish soil. Finland refused, knowing that accepting Soviet demands would mean losing independence. On November 30, 1939, the Soviet Union invaded Finland without declaring war. 500,000 Soviet soldiers, supported by thousands of tanks and aircraft, attacked across the Finnish border. Soviet leadership expected a quick victory. Finland had only 300,000 soldiers, limited tanks and aircraft, and was vastly outnumbered. Soviet planners predicted the war would last 2 weeks. They were catastrophically wrong.
Simo Haiha, now 34 years old, was immediately mobilized along with every other trained Finnish man. He was assigned to 6th Company, JR-34, 34th Infantry Regiment, defending the Kola River area in southeastern Finland, close to his home region, in forests he knew intimately. His commanding officers recognized him as an experienced hunter and marksman and assigned him to sniper duties. Simo's war was about to begin. The Winter War, as it became known, was unlike any conflict in history. Finnish soldiers, vastly outnumbered, used terrain, weather, and superior tactics to inflict devastating casualties on Soviet forces. The forests and harsh winter weather negated Soviet advantages in tanks and aircraft. Finnish soldiers, all of whom had grown up in similar conditions, moved easily through snow and forests that immobilized Soviet troops from warmer climates. The war became a winter hell for Soviet soldiers and a legendary defensive stand for Finland. Simo Haiha's sector, the Kola River, saw some of the heaviest fighting. Soviet forces attacked repeatedly, trying to break through Finnish defensive lines. Finnish soldiers were outnumbered by ratios of 10 to 1 or higher, holding positions through incredible courage and tactical skill. Simo's role was to defend his sector by eliminating Soviet officers, machine gunners, and any soldier who presented a target. He was given a Finnish-manufactured Mosin-Nagant M28-30 rifle and sent into the forest to kill. Simo's methods were simple, but devastatingly effective. He operated alone or with a single spotter, moving through the snow-covered forests dressed entirely in white camouflage. He used iron sights rather than telescopic scopes. Scopes could fog in extreme cold, and the glint from scope lenses could reveal a sniper's position. He fired from positions that were carefully chosen, always within escape route, always with cover, always where Soviet counter-snipers couldn't easily locate him. The temperature during the Winter War regularly dropped to minus 40 degrees Celsius, minus 40 Fahrenheit. Soviet soldiers, inadequately equipped for extreme cold, suffered terribly. Their weapons froze and malfunctioned. Their vehicles wouldn't start. They huddled around fires for warmth, making themselves easy targets. Meanwhile, Finnish soldiers like Simo, who had grown up in these conditions, operated effectively despite the cold. Simo wore multiple layers of wool, kept his rifle action clear of ice, and moved constantly to avoid freezing. Simo's technique for shooting was unusual. He positioned himself low to the ground, sometimes lying in snow, creating a small, stable platform for his rifle. He breathed steadily, controlling his heart rate, waiting for the perfect moment. When a Soviet soldier appeared, Simo would fire one shot, usually hitting the target in the head or chest, and then immediately move to a different position. Soviet soldiers rarely saw him before they died. The psychological effect of Simo's sniping was enormous. Soviet soldiers in his sector knew they were being hunted by an invisible enemy. Any movement could result in sudden death. They couldn't see the sniper, couldn't predict where he would strike, couldn't defend against him effectively. Morale collapsed. Soviet officers reported that their men were terrified to move during daylight, cowering in trenches rather than risk exposure. Soviet commanders became obsessed with killing Simo Hai-ha. They sent counter-sniper teams, Soviet Union's own expert marksmen, to hunt him. Simo killed them. They launched artillery barrages against areas where they thought he might be hiding. Simo survived by constantly moving and using the terrain for cover. They sent entire infantry companies to sweep the forests looking for him. Simo vanished like smoke, reappearing miles away to kill more Soviet soldiers. Soviet soldiers began to call him Belaya Smert, which means the White Death. He was a legend and a terror, a ghost who killed without being seen. Some Soviet soldiers believed he wasn't human, that he was a supernatural entity or a Finnish demon. This psychological effect was as valuable as the actual casualties Simo inflicted. Soviet troops in his sector were demoralized, afraid, and combat ineffective. By February 1940, Simo Hai-ha had killed over 500 Soviet soldiers in approximately 100 days of combat, an average of 5 kills per day in a winter war fought in forests where visibility was limited and targets were scarce. This number is officially confirmed kills, requiring witness verification. His actual kill count was likely higher. By any measure, Simo Hai-ha was the most lethal sniper in human history, achieving a kill count that no sniper before or since has matched. But Simo didn't just use his rifle. He also used a Sumi KP-31 submachine gun during close-range engagements and defensive battles. Estimates suggest he killed an additional 200-plus Soviet soldiers with his submachine gun during Soviet assaults on Finnish positions. Combined with his sniper kills, Simo Hai-ha personally killed over 700 Soviet soldiers in 100 days of combat, a level of individual lethality that seems almost impossible. Soviet forces intensified their efforts to kill Simo. They knew roughly which sector he operated in and focused resources on eliminating him. On March 6, 1940, just days before the Winter War ended, a Soviet soldier finally hit Simo. Accounts vary on whether it was a sniper's bullet, a stray shot, or an explosive bullet, but something struck Simo in the face, specifically hitting his left jaw and cheekbone. The wound was catastrophic. The bullet tore away much of his lower face, destroying his jaw and several teeth. He fell unconscious, bleeding heavily into the snow. Finnish soldiers found him and evacuated him to a field hospital, but doctors didn't expect him to survive. The wound was too severe, the blood loss too great. They did what they could to stabilize him and waited for him to die.
But Simo Hai-ha refused to die. He remained unconscious for several days, hovering between life and death. Slowly, incredibly, he began to recover. On March 13, 1940, the day the Winter War officially ended with a peace treaty between Finland and the Soviet Union, Simo regained consciousness. He had survived a wound that should have killed him instantly. The Winter War ended with Finland maintaining its independence, but ceding approximately 10% of its territory to the Soviet Union. Finland had fought the Soviet Union to a standstill, inflicting casualties that shocked the world. The Soviets suffered approximately 126,000 dead and 250,000 wounded. Finland suffered approximately 25,000 dead and 43,000 wounded. Considering the vast disparity in forces, Finland's defensive stand was one of military history's most impressive achievements. Simo Hai-ha was promoted from corporal to second lieutenant by Field Marshal Carl Gustaf Emil Mannerheim, Finland's military leader, in recognition of his extraordinary service. He received numerous military decorations, but the facial wound had ended his combat career. Even after recovering, Simo was severely disfigured and his shooting ability was permanently affected. His war was over. Simo spent months recovering from his wound. Doctors performed multiple surgeries to reconstruct his face, but they could only partially repair the damage. He was left with permanent disfigurement and chronic pain. But he was alive, which was more than anyone had expected after seeing his wound. And Finland was still independent, which meant all the fighting and suffering had achieved its objective. After the Winter War, Finland had only a brief peace. In 1941, when Germany invaded the Soviet Union, Finland joined the war as a German co-belligerent, not formally an ally, hoping to reclaim the territory lost in the Winter War. This continuation war lasted until 1944, with Finland eventually signing a separate peace with the Soviet Union and turning against its former German partners. Simo Häyhä did not participate in the continuation war. His injuries prevented further combat service. After World War II ended, Simo returned to farming and hunting in southeastern Finland. The territory he grew up in had been ceded to the Soviet Union, so he couldn't return home. He settled in a different area and resumed the quiet life he had lived before the war. He rarely spoke about his wartime experiences, giving very few interviews and generally avoiding publicity. He had no interest in being celebrated as a war hero. He had done what needed to be done to defend Finland, nothing more. Over the decades, Simo's legend grew. Military historians researched his record and confirmed his status as history's deadliest sniper. His tactics were studied in military schools around the world. The Soviet soldiers who had fought against him told their own stories of the White Death, the invisible Finnish sniper who had terrorized an entire Soviet army. But Simo himself remained silent, living simply, hunting, and avoiding attention. In interviews he did give, Simo was modest to the point of self-effacement. He insisted he wasn't special. Any Finnish soldier would have done the same in his position. He credited his success to luck, good training, and knowing the terrain. He expressed no pride in killing 700-plus men, saying only that it had been necessary to defend Finland. When pressed about how he felt about killing so many people, Simo replied simply, "I did what I was told to do as well as I could." Simo Häyhä lived a long life despite his severe injuries. He never married, living alone or with relatives, maintaining the private, solitary lifestyle he had always preferred. He hunted well into his old age, though his facial injuries affected his shooting accuracy. He became a skilled and successful moose hunter, adapting his technique to accommodate his physical limitations. He lived to see Finland survive World War II, maintain its independence, and prosper as a democratic nation aligned with the West. In his final decades, Simo became more willing to discuss his wartime experiences, giving occasional interviews to journalists and historians. But he remained uncomfortable with being called a hero. He insisted that all Finnish soldiers who fought in the Winter War were heroes, that he had simply been luckier than most to survive. He expressed regret for the necessity of killing, but not for defending Finland. He believed the Winter War was completely justified. Finland had been invaded and had every right to defend itself. Simo Häyhä died on April 1, 2002, at the age of 96. He had lived 62 years after being shot in the face, 57 years after World War II ended, and had witnessed Finland transform from a poor agricultural nation to a prosperous modern democracy. His funeral was attended by Finnish military leaders, veterans, and citizens who honored him as a symbol of Finnish courage and determination during the Winter War. Modern military snipers study Simo Häyhä's tactics and techniques. His use of terrain, camouflage, and patience remains relevant nearly a century later. His preference for iron sights over telescopic scopes in extreme cold is still taught in military sniper schools. His understanding that sniping is as much about fieldcraft and invisibility as it is about marksmanship influences modern sniper doctrine. Simo Häyhä, the Finnish farmer, wrote the textbook on military sniping without ever intending to. Finland remembers Simo Häyhä as a national hero, a symbol of the Finnish spirit that refused to surrender to a vastly larger enemy. During the Winter War, when the world expected Finland to be conquered in days, soldiers like Simo proved that determination, superior tactics, and understanding of terrain could defeat numerical superiority. Finland's survival as an independent nation is partly due to soldiers like Simo who made the cost of conquering Finland too high for even the mighty Soviet Union to accept. The moment that defined Simo Haiha's legacy came in a 1998 interview when he was 93 years old. A journalist asked him how he felt about being called the deadliest sniper in history, about killing over 700 men. Simo was silent for a long time, clearly uncomfortable with the question. Then he gave an answer that captured his entire philosophy. He said he had done his duty. Finland had been invaded by an aggressor who wanted to destroy Finnish independence. Every man Simo killed was a Soviet soldier participating in that invasion. He took no pleasure in killing them, but he had no guilt about it either. They were enemies trying to conquer his country, and he stopped them. It was that simple. War was terrible, but sometimes necessary, and when your country is fighting for survival, you do what must be done. That was Simo Haiha, a farmer who became the deadliest sniper in human history. A quiet, modest man who killed over 700 enemy soldiers and then returned to farming. A legend who never wanted to be legendary. His story reminds us that ordinary people, when their homeland is threatened, can accomplish extraordinary things, and that true heroes often don't consider themselves heroic at all.